Today we're going to be discussing the origins and the making of Roald Dahl's children's book The BFG, and the animated movie that was made very shortly afterwards, and additionally taking a look at a long-lost deleted scene from the movie. If this sounds like your cup of tea, then don't forget to subscribe. Be sure to click the bell so you're notified as to when a video's release. Follow me on social media for ongoing updates. And for any generous viewer, you can now support Scribbles to Screen on Patreon, seeing videos like this nearly 2 weeks in advance and other cool perks. Now with the context formally out of the way, let's stroll down to Giant Country.
If you get a tiny little idea that shoots into your head, you very quickly write it down in one line. It's like a dream. If you don't write a dream down, by the time you're having breakfast, you've forgotten it.
The initial story about the BFG was about a man who sucked ideas and people's thoughts from their brain into a jar. Of course, with those that are familiar with the final BFG story, the novel had came along quite a considerable amount, such as this man with his questionable morals, into this fantasy-friendly giant who was single-handedly responsible for making everybody's dreams.
The other great mythology thing in children's folklore and literature is giants, so I thought I've got to try to do one.
This big friendly giant, or later abbreviated to the BFG, would be accompanied with a small girl called Sophie, named after Roald Dahl's eldest granddaughter.
I got the BFG and the little girl, but it wasn't very exciting. There was something missing in it, and I kept looking at it and saying, well, yes, it's all right.
The story was lacking a little quirk just to make it extra memorable. 18 years prior to his development on the BFG, his then wife Patricia Neal went through a massive stroke. Roald Dahl kept the family very close together during this time. Patricia would have to relearn to walk and talk, coincidentally learning them alongside her newborn daughter, Lucy Dahl. It was during that phase of learning to use words that she would get her sentences quite mixed up.
When she started to pick up words, she made them up. I made a whole list of them once. She used to once say, "You drive me crazy." She used to say, "You Jake my deodles," which is a splendid phrase, you know.
And that was the charm. Roald Dahl felt that was most appropriate for his giant, to be a little bit squibbly of his English language.
And that did it. That excited me quite a lot. And then I had masses of fun with that all the way through, you see.
The charm of the Roald Dahl stories was his lowbrow and dark humour. Take the BFG's fizzy drink, Frog Scottle. Now, unlike a sugary drink in the human world, where the bubbles would travel up, the Frog Squattle, the bubbles travel downwards. So where one consumes the drink, instead of traditionally burping, you may find the Frog Squattle bubbles travelling down to your other end, what the BFG refers to as a whiz popper. Likely one of the earliest children's stories to deal with fart humour.
You've got to be a bit of an ass in a way. You've got to be a giggler. There's not many fellas of 66 who rock with laughter at other childish jokes.
A delicious taste of Roald Dahl's black humour is near to the end of the book, where after all the bad giants have been captured and placed into a pit that they can't get out of, 3 drunk men climb over and fall into the pit, much to the delight of the human-eating giants, who found themselves satisfied that evening.
Killed in the most grisly possible way, like little boys pulled out of the windows and eaten by giants, bones crunched up and everything. That's fine, as long as there is a whopping great laugh at the same time.
The artist Quentin Blake is responsible for providing the majority of Roald Dahl illustrations, although for the BFG he had to redo the illustrations twice as Roald Dahl wasn't satisfied with them first time round. In all of the original illustrations, the BFG was wearing an apron and boots. This was how his appearance was described through text, but Roald Dahl felt that it was unsuitable uniform for him to wear for the whole duration of the book. So Quentin Blake would try and experiment many different outfits and costumes for the BFG, and finally settle upon a uniform that seemed more appropriate for the BFG to wear for multiple different tasks. Quentin Blake additionally based the look of the BFG on Roald Dahl's mate, Walter Saunders, who aided in building Roald's little hut down his garden, where he wrote not only the BFG, but many other classic children's stories. While Roald Dahl was able to retain his childlike humour in his senior years, he was also notorious for acting like a school bully, using his popular status to pick on anybody he desired, as well as his position making a number of anti-Semitic and racist remarks. his publishers have removed some of the offending content out of several of his children's books, such as Willy Wonka, The Witches, Matilda, and even the BFG. At the end of 2020, the Roald Dahl family and company made a quiet apology. About 9 months later, Netflix had bought the whole Roald Dahl company for an estimated cost of somewhere within the billions. Some of that money would be going towards several charities, notably anti-hate and anti-racism organisations. Make of that what you will. Only 2 years later, after the book's publication in 1982, 1984 would see the early development of a BFG animated movie, with legendary English animator Brian Cosgrove making the movie under his studio Cosgrove Hall Films, famous for their British TV animations, such as Wind of the Willows and Danger Mouse. With Brian's vision of the film, it was decided that 2D animation was going to be the most achievable to bring the film to life. Through the medium, it was going to be much more easier to show the fantasy worlds of the book, rather than stop motion or model animation.
And we were ready for producing a drawn feature. The animators were ready, their hands were ready. So it wasn't a difficult decision at all.
To date, this would be the only feature animation the company would ever make. In terms of the 2D animation style, it was considered to base the look on the Quentin Blake illustrations, but it was decided that the style would be too loose and difficult to animate the expressions. So they went for a much more traditional 2D theatrical style, like that of Disney and Don Bluth. Sophie's design was reworked to look more like Sophie Dahl, Roald Dahl's real-life granddaughter.
What are you doing here?
My name's Sophie and this is Mould.
What?
I'm her grandfather.
Mould? Mouldy?
She's called me Mould all my life, yes. All her life.
Mr. Dahl was quite pleased with this.
He said we couldn't have bettered it. That was precisely how he saw Sophie, which again was nice.
The majority of the human characters were animated by rotoscope, where you trace over a live-action model. Sophie was nearly going to be rotoscoped, but it was decided to make her traditionally animated instead. Just like the other giants, the BFG actors were mainly BBC and ITV regulars. Sophie's voice actress was Amanda Root. The title character, the BFG, was voiced by Del Boy himself, David Jason.
I is the BFG.
Who's a Cosgrove Hall Films regular, who's voice acted in dozens of their projects. Her Majesty Elizabeth II was Angela Thorne, as well as Don Henderson, lending his voice to the flesh-eating giants. Michael Knowles voiced 1 out of 2 of the head of the armies. Voice of the other head of the army was Balak Barkley. This would be his final role. He passed away in 1988, a year before the movie came out. In the end credits, the film was dedicated to George Jackson, an animator who worked on some of the biggest UK animations of the 70s and 80s. The film features 2 songs, the first of which was Whiz Popper, where the BFG explains as to what exactly a whiz popper is, and a pop cover song, Sometimes Secretly. There was another song in a similar fashion called Mirror Mirror, but it went unused in the final cut, as well as a romantic song called Two Worlds. Both of these songs were made available on the movie soundtrack. The film was originally intended for a theatrical release, although this was later downgraded for a Christmas Day TV premiere on ITV. It was greatly praised on its release. In 1990, it was nominated for a BAFTA award for Best Children's Programming, but the real audience member to win over was Roald Dahl himself.
He had a reputation for not taking kindly to film versions of his books. He hated Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and I was a little bit concerned in case my view of BFG was something he might not like.
Roald Dahl got to see the film with his family in a private cinema screening, with the director Brian Cosgrove just seated near the exit, ready to step out if Dahl made a scene.
One of the special moments for me was that when the lights came up, he stood up and applauded.
Roald Dahl pleasantly enjoyed the film. Out of the 4 movies that were made during his lifetime based on his children's books, this would be the only one he admitted to enjoy. The BFG would be the second to last adaptation that Roald Dahl would get to see, as he would pass away in November of 1990. The final budget was about £3 million. It was able to recoup its costs by its home media sales. The BFG has remained to be an adored animated feature in its country of origins. And thanks to the Spielberg remake, it's been getting more attention in the US market. Sadly, for the majority of the movie's existence, it's only been presented in its TV broadcast 4:3 aspect ratio. But thankfully in 2012, in time for the 30th anniversary of the book's first publication, the movie was fully remastered, presented in widescreen for the very first time. How it was always meant to be seen. Finally the opportunity to see the full expansion that the Cosgrove Hall team had accomplished. Although, as a lost media enthusiast, it's still not everything we've seen from this rendition of the BFG, as there's still an entirely missing deleted scene that has never been made available anywhere. On their journey back to Giant Country, they stop by a natural pool.
Oh, stops our feet here for a moment. Now, Sophie, I don't want you wandering off too far.
Well, perhaps just a quick look. Over to that rock.
But to Sophie's surprise, the rock she stands on is an enormous beetle, flying off with poor Sophie clenching on tight on its back.
Oh no, Sophie!
No, go down. Please take me down.
Fortunately for Sophie, the beetle came to a stop and placed her safely back on the ground. Unfortunately for Sophie, she was right on the belly of Flesh Lump-Eater, amongst the other human-eating giants. With all of them asleep, she quietly makes a run for it. While she was able to get out of their sight, the giants soon wake up and pick up her scent.
You lot, wake up. Now, you smells like human bean. Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smells human bean.
Sophie is backed up, hidden away behind some rocks with nowhere to go. Her attention is occupied by the giants in front of her, not seeing the giant right behind her. To Sophie's relief, it's only the BFG.
Oh, I'm glad I saw this before they did. Now, Sophie, let's pack up these dreams and get some in my bootlace.
The company Puffin's Book released a storybook adaptation of the film, publicised the same year, directly using the film's animation cells for its illustrations. The book has 10 deleted shots that were not used for the final print. Taking a closer look at the images that were seen in the film, several of the slides don't feature the special effects as seen in its movie's counterpart. And on the soundtrack of the film, there's no tracks for this whole discarded scene. It would have likely been cut during the post-production stage, before the visual effects and soundtrack were finalised. We only know about this deleted scene thanks to the Puffin book. As to why it was cut is pure speculation. Perhaps the sequence was an unneeded skirtion of Sophie being in danger, thus its removal was non-consequential for the plot. Or debuting on a commercial network television, it had to reach a certain runtime for its schedule. While the sequence was removed, a small bit of the deleted animation got to be partially used in the final cut. During the Queen's dream sequence, relaying the giant's world, it reuses much of the animation that was seen in the film so far. Aside from one unique shot of several giants walking, that's not seen anywhere else in the film, so it must have very well come from a deleted scene. Now, as to where the removed footage might be today, Cosgrove Hall Films went under during 2009, being completely absorbed by ITV, who currently hold the copyright to the film, then Universal with the distribution rights, being responsible for the movie's last physical home media release. In 2016, to coincide with the Spielberg and Disney remake, those respected companies are likely to hold the film's assets, such as the original negative and maybe the lost deleted scene. Will it ever see an official release? Well, who knows? Maybe the more people that show their curiosity could inspire a higher-up to maybe take action.
Alright there, I'm George.
My name is Pearl Walker, and I done the voice of Sophie.
I did the voice of the BFG and the Flesh Lump-Eater.
You can follow my Instagram at pearl.walker21.
Well, you can go over to my YouTube channel, HeadphonesUK. I've done reviews on all of the Roald Dahl movies